The night split open above the ancient Roman marketplace as if the sky itself had taken a wound. Thunder cracked sharply over the tiled rooftops, rolling through the stone columns and echoing across the emptying forum like a warning no one wanted to hear. The storm had come early, pulling a thick curtain of rain across the city, washing the dust from statues and pounding against the iron cages lined along the market square. Those cages were never empty. Not in this place. Not in this empire. They rattled now in the wind, filled with shifters, thieves, rebels, whoever the empire decided belonged at the bottom that week. Torches struggled to stay lit, their flames bowing sideways under the assault of the storm, flickering like dying breaths across the bronze chains, the worn stone, the faces of the condemned. Through this chaos, she ran. Barefoot. Bleeding. Breath tearing through her lungs like she had swallowed fire. Her feet slapped against the wet marble, slippery and sharp beneath her. The bronze shackles around her wrists bit deeper with every movement, rubbing her skin raw, leaving streaks of blood that the rain washed away almost instantly. Her hair, tangled and matted from hours of captivity, plastered to her face as she sprinted between the towering columns of the colonnade. Her entire body trembled, not from weakness but from the surge of something hot and electric beneath her skin. Something she was fighting with everything she had. She didn't dare look back. But she heard them. The guards shouting. The pounding of boots. The scrape of metal against stone as someone dragged a spear through water. Their voices bounced off every wall, sharpening her fear until it felt like arrows in her spine. They knew what she carried inside her. They knew what she had done. The wooden stake was still lodged against her ribs, the shaft broken but buried deep. She hadn't pulled it free. Couldn't. The blow had been meant for the vampire king, thrown with enough force to end any creature alive. She had stepped into its path without thinking, without breathing, without weighing consequences. Instinct had driven her. Something older than logic. Something that should not exist inside her. And now the entire empire was after her because of it. Rainwater mixed with blood on her skin, running in red streams down her side. Her vision blurred around the edges, each step sending a violent shock through her ribs. The world pulsed in and out of clarity, but she pushed through the dizziness, pushed through the ache, pushed through the chaos screaming inside her skull. She had to move. Had to stay ahead of them. If she stopped even for a moment, they would take her back to the cages. The auction block. The place where they sold people like livestock to the highest bidder. Thunder cracked again overhead. This one felt closer. Too close. It rolled down the length of the forum, rattling windows and shaking loose a trail of dust from the upper arches. The wind howled down the narrow streets, picking up debris, scraps of parchment, bits of straw from the animal carts, fragments of old banners torn from the walls. It whipped everything into a frenzy, swirling around her as she ran. It felt like the night itself was chasing her. And still, beneath the fear, something else stirred. A tremor under her skin. A heat crawling up her arms. A spark that shouldn't be there. Her power. The one her pack had feared. The one the empire had tried to suppress. The one she had locked down deep inside her bones for so long she had almost convinced herself it was gone. But tonight, with fear crushing her lungs and blood soaking her side, it woke up. It throbbed like a heartbeat, sending thin threads of silver light flickering beneath her skin. They glowed faintly, like something ancient trying to force its way back into the world. She clenched her teeth and forced herself forward, gritting through the pain. She couldn't afford for anyone to see. Not here. Not now. Not when the consequences could tear apart everything she had left. Her breath hitched as she stumbled, catching herself on the edge of a stone pillar. She sucked in air, sharp and painful, tasting iron and smoke on her tongue. Her legs shook beneath her, muscles straining to keep her upright. The storm soaked her through, turning the thin fabric of her torn shift into a second skin. The cold sank deep into her bones, but the heat inside her fought it, pushing back, expanding, burning under her flesh until she wondered how long she could hold it in. She looked around the marketplace. The torches flickered low, struggling against the wind. Their glow danced across the faces of statues carved centuries before she was born, stern Roman gods with stone eyes that watched her like judges passing silent condemnation. The cages rattled again as some of the prisoners inside woke to the commotion, their silhouettes moving behind iron bars, too weak or too frightened to call out. The scent of the place clung to the air, wet iron, old smoke, damp earth, and something darker, something she tried not to think about. The scent of fear. Of hopelessness. The Empire liked to keep it that way. She pushed off the pillar, forcing her legs to move again, pushing deeper between the rows of abandoned merchant stalls. Wooden tables lay overturned, baskets scattered across the ground, fish scales and fruit peels littering the stone. Rain drummed against the tarp covers that were still tied in place, each drop a rapid heartbeat against her ears. She wove between them, breath coming in short, sharp bursts now. The pain in her ribs flared, but she kept moving. She didn't dare slow down. Not with the guards so close. She heard them again, closer this time. The clatter of armor. The barked orders. The sound of metal striking metal as someone drew a blade. Her pulse jumped. Her vision narrowed. The world around her shrank into a tunnel of shadow and rain and fear. She turned sharply into a narrow alley between two merchant houses, her shoulder slamming into a wall hard enough to make her gasp. The impact sent sparks of pain down her side, but she used it for momentum, pushing off and sprinting again, feet splashing through puddles that reflected the trembling torchlight behind her. The alley opened into a small courtyard where a toppled chariot lay abandoned, one wheel broken off, its paint peeling, its horse long gone. Vines crawled up the stone walls around it, dark and wild, as if nature itself had reclaimed this forgotten corner of the city. She stumbled toward it, her hand slapping against the wooden frame as she half collapsed behind it. Her chest heaved. Every breath felt like it scraped against something sharp inside. Her fingers trembled uncontrollably. She clamped her hand over the stake wound, trying to steady her breathing. The pain radiated outward, hot and jagged, pulsing through her like a second heartbeat. Rainwater poured down her face, mingling with tears she didn't remember letting fall. The world around her blurred again. The edges softened. The sound of her heartbeat drowned everything else out for a moment, loud, frantic, uneven. But this was no place to rest. Because she wasn't alone. Something shifted in the shadows to her right. Too controlled. Too steady. Not the clumsy movements of a guard. Not the frantic steps of someone fleeing. Something else. Someone else. Her breath froze in her chest. The figure stood half-hidden, the storm behind him outlining his silhouette. Broad shoulders, stillness like a held breath, presence heavy enough to quiet even the wind. He didn't move. Didn't approach. Didn't call for the guards. He just watched her. And in that moment, the air changed. The storm's rage softened into a slow, rumbling growl above them. The torches near the courtyard flickered out, leaving only moonlight cutting through the clouds. The rain quieted to a thin curtain around them. Even her pain dulled, if only for a heartbeat. She felt the power under her skin react, rising, pulling toward him, as if something deep and ancient recognized the presence in front of her. But she didn't know who he was. Or what he wanted. All she knew was that the Empire had been hunting her relentlessly for hours, and now, someone had found her. Someone not wearing armor. Someone not shouting. Someone who moved like a shadow with purpose. Her pulse kicked hard against her ribs, almost drowning out the storm. She couldn't run anymore. Her body wouldn't allow it. She couldn't fight. She had nothing left in her except fear and the dangerous spark of a power she no longer trusted. She pressed her back against the chariot wheel, rain continuing to fall in thin streams down her face, each drop icy against her burning skin. Her mind raced, trying to piece together what little strength she had left, searching for any hint of who this figure might be. But the storm had erased all scent. All sound. All logic. All she had was instinct. And instinct told her that whatever, or whoever, stood in that shadow, was not here by accident. Not tonight. Not in this place. Not when she was bleeding and hunted and torn between life and something worse than death. Her breath trembled. Her hands shook. Her heart pounded with the kind of fear that tasted like metal. And yet, beneath the fear was something else. A spark. A pull. A whisper she didn't understand. Then the thunder cracked again overhead, lighting up the courtyard for a split second. Enough to see his eyes. Not human. Not Roman. Not safe. Gold. Bright, sharp, predatory gold. Her entire world stilled. Someone had found her before the Empire could. Someone far more dangerous. Someone who watched her not like prey, but like destiny. And as the shadows closed around her and her heartbeat hammered against the storm, the narrator's voice breaks through the moment with a breathless warning. If this story grips your heart already, if you feel the storm tightening around her and want to know what waits in those golden eyes, subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections. Before the chase closes in around her. The shadow shifted first, almost imperceptibly at the edge of the courtyard, as if it were made of smoke and wind and rain. For a heartbeat, she thought it was just the storm twisting its own darkness into shapes, the gold flicker of lightning sketching lines across stone and wet cobblestone. But then it stepped forward, and the shape solidified, became real, became undeniable. Tall. Broader than any man she had ever seen, every movement deliberate, powerful, contained. He wore the crest of the Lost Wolf Legion stitched into his dark leather tunic, the symbol gleaming faintly even in the fractured torchlight. Scars ran across his arms and hands, across his chest, across the side of his face that caught the brief flare of lightning. Each mark told a story she could not read, a history of battles fought and survived, of violence given and taken, of a life lived closer to the edge than most could even imagine. He spoke before she could force a word past her lips. Her name. He said it like it had weight, like it carried meaning she hadn't allowed herself to claim yet. It was her name. And it was not a question. Not a demand. Not a warning. It was a recognition. And in that instant, the world shrank down to the two of them, the storm, the rain, the broken chariot, and her ragged breath. Her instinct screamed at her to run again, to throw herself into the darkness she had been fleeing, but her legs refused. They were trembling, soaked, bruised, wounded, but they could not move. Not yet. Because there was something in his voice, in the way he said her name, that rooted her to the spot. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to flinch. She wanted to know exactly what he was, why he was here, why he knew her, why he looked at her like she was not prey but something dangerous. Something precious. Something to be preserved. The bronze shackles around her wrists caught his attention next. His eyes flicked downward, and for a single, fleeting moment, she saw something shift in him. Hesitation, recognition, a careful assessment of pain and endurance. He should arrest her. He should grab her, drag her back to the cages, hand her over to the Empire. He should. But he didn't. Instead, his hand moved. Bare. Exposed. Like he didn't fear the metal cutting into him, like he could bend reality with the strength coiled under his skin. And with a single motion, the chain snapped. Bronze shattered under the force of his grip, the clang ringing out across the courtyard. The sound should have deafened her, but instead, it grounded her. Rooted her. Taught her that survival had a new shape now, one she had not anticipated. And then she saw it. Eyes that were not fully human. Gold. Pure, sharp, predatory gold, catching the fleeting torchlight, glimmering even beneath the curtain of rain. They were eyes that could strip secrets from her soul without a word. Eyes that knew more than she dared admit, that could see every scar, every wound, every betrayal carved into her skin and her bones. And even with all the fear clawing at her chest, even with the rain and blood and exhaustion dragging at her from every angle, she felt a pull. Dangerous. Magnetic. Irresistible. Her body reacted before her mind could. She flinched when he stepped closer, every nerve screaming both to flee and to lean in, to see, to understand, to surrender in the only way she could imagine without dying. He stopped when he saw the stake wound against her ribs. Not fear. Not judgment. But calculation. Assessment. Something in his chest tightened, something she couldn't yet name. The tension hung there in the air, thick as the rain, heavy as the storm that refused to relent. She could smell him now. Leather, storm, iron, something ancient and raw, something that made her heart hammer against the cage of her ribs. Her breath came in shallow bursts, fogging the air around her face. Every inhale burned her lungs like fire. Every exhale trembled through her chest. And in the middle of it, a voice cut through the static, low, steady, and unbearably commanding. You shouldn't be alive after taking that stake. It was not a question. It was a statement. An observation. A judgment. And yet, beneath it, there was a thread of awe. A shadow of disbelief. A hint of something that might have been admiration if she dared to risk trusting it. She swallowed, the taste of iron and rain heavy on her tongue. She wanted to say something. Anything. To deny, to explain, to fight. But words tangled in her throat. Her body wanted to run. Her mind screamed that she couldn't. That if she ran now, she would leave everything behind, including whatever fragile thread of safety that might exist in the gold of his eyes. He moved again, slow, deliberate. Not threatening. Not advancing in anger. But close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, even through the rain and the storm and the wet layers between them. She could feel it in her bones. In the hum of power thrumming beneath her skin. The pull of the silver flame that had always been her curse, her secret, her weapon she didn't yet understand. It responded to him. It trembled toward him like a moth to light. And she hated herself a little for it. The courtyard felt smaller now. The storm felt quieter, distant. The chaos of the marketplace, the cages, the screams of the empire chasing her, faded to a backdrop of nothing but tension and heat and anticipation. He lifted his hand slowly. Not to strike. Not to restrain. But to tilt her chin up, to force her to meet his gaze. You shouldn't be alive after taking that stake. He said it again, as if repeating it made the truth sink deeper. And she saw something she hadn't expected, care. Tenderness. Protection. Not from obligation, not from duty, not from fear of being blamed, but something like recognition. Like he saw the part of her that had survived, that had bled, that had run barefoot through rain and blood, and he approved. Not praise. Not permission. But acknowledgement. She flinched again. Every nerve in her body screamed, every instinct begged her to recoil, to duck, to disappear, but her chest rose with each ragged breath, refusing to bow completely. Because beneath the fear, beneath the storm, beneath the gold of those eyes, something dangerous and impossible stirred, trust. Not the trust she had known with the Empire or with her pack, the fragile, brittle trust that broke with a single betrayal. No, this was raw. Fierce. Terrifying. The kind of trust that could either save her or destroy her entirely. The air between them tightened, thickened, braided itself around their shared space. It was charged. Electric. Dangerous. Everything she had learned about fear and survival whispered at her to run. Everything she had learned about desire and instinct whispered at her to stay. She wanted to scream, to cry, to beg for safety, to demand it, to reject it. But the words wouldn't come. Not yet. Not here. Not while the rain soaked her hair and the blood dripped from her ribs and the storm raged above. And still, she stayed. Because he didn't move like a predator. He moved like a storm contained, like a wolf who could kill and protect in the same heartbeat. He didn't advance. He didn't threaten. But every motion, every shift of weight, every flicker of gold eyes was a message she could not ignore. I am here. I am watching. I see you. The silver flame under her skin pulsed stronger. She had not allowed it to surface in months. Not since she had learned what it could do, what it could destroy, what it could awaken in her and in others. And yet, now it answered him, creeping along her nerves in sparks of warmth and light, as if it recognized the pull of something older than fear, older than blood, older than the empire itself. Every beat of her heart shouted at her to run, to hide, to survive. Every fiber of her being longed to reach for him, to lean into whatever promise or peril he represented. The storm above softened slightly, thunder rolling in the distance rather than crashing over them. Rain still fell, but it felt filtered, controlled, as if the world itself had paused to witness this encounter. He didn't speak again immediately. He let her struggle with the chaos of her own body, the ache in her ribs, the tension in her muscles, the storm in her mind. And she realized, in that shivering, soaked, desperate moment, that she had never been seen before. Truly seen. Not by her pack. Not by her enemies. Not by the vampire king she had tried to save. Not even by herself. And yet here he was. Gold eyes fixed on her, unwavering. She shivered, not from cold. Not from fear. But from the weight of recognition. From the knowledge that nothing would ever be the same again. From the realization that this man, the Alpha who should have been impossible, unattainable, dangerous, had appeared in her chaos and changed its shape entirely. And in that moment, she understood something terrifying and exhilarating all at once. She was no longer running from everything. She was standing at the threshold of something far bigger than fear, far bigger than survival, far bigger than herself. And it terrified her. Because she had no choice now. The Alpha had arrived. And the world would never be the same. The storm had passed, or at least it had paused, leaving the ruins of the marketplace slick and glistening under a sickle moon that barely pierced the clouds. Rain still dripped from broken awnings and collapsed stalls, pooling in cracks in the marble stones. She moved carefully through the debris, her bare feet bleeding, skin raw and trembling, each step leaving a mark on the wet surface like a confession she couldn't speak aloud. The Alpha's presence behind her was a shadow and a weight, heavy enough to press against her shoulders, calm enough to steady the tempest of fear and adrenaline roaring through her chest. Her ribs ached with a constant, sharp rhythm that spoke of the stake still lodged too close to her heart. She fought the flare of pain with every breath, letting her mind drift to what it always did when she was cornered, when she was weak, when she was forced to survive in a world that wanted her gone. She was born in a forbidden bloodline, a lineage whispered about in fear and reverence, a bloodline the Empire had tried to erase before it had fully manifested in her. Half shifter, half oracle. A child with fire in her veins and visions in her mind, someone who could ignite the world and yet see every consequence before it came. Her own pack had called her dangerous, unpredictable, a liability too volatile to remain among them. They had exiled her before she could even understand what she truly was. Memory rose like smoke in her chest, curling around her lungs and forcing her to draw a shuddering breath. She remembered the first time she had truly lost control. The silver flame had erupted without warning in the war camp of the Romans, consuming tents, supplies, and the lives of men who had thought they could command her. The heat had seared her skin as much as her soul, burning her hands, her body, her very identity. She had learned then that power could isolate her, could make even allies afraid to touch her, could turn love to fear in a single glance. She had learned never to trust. Never to let anyone close enough to see the flames in her blood. Not alphas, not kings, not anyone. And yet, here she was. Running, bleeding, exposed in every way imaginable, with the most dangerous alpha she had ever seen walking behind her, silent, patient, controlled. Every step of his leather-clad presence pressed against her like a question she wasn't ready to answer. His gaze, that unyielding gold, burned at the edges of her mind, igniting parts of her she had spent years trying to bury. Her mind drifted again, unwilling, relentless, dragging her back to the night she had saved the vampire king. He had been a predator she could not hope to survive against, and yet, instinct, or perhaps some reckless brand of courage, had driven her to step into the path of his death. She had taken a wooden stake meant for him, the edge of the world pressed to her chest, and survived. Miraculously, impossibly, she had survived. No one knew. No one would ever know. Not the pack that had exiled her. Not the empire that would have killed her without a second thought. Not even the Alpha walking silently behind her now. It was a secret she carried like a pulse beneath her skin, a truth she could not afford to share, a debt that no one could ever repay. Her thoughts twisted in on themselves, each memory a knife turning slowly in her chest. The exile she had endured, the nights she had spent hiding from predators human and supernatural alike, the constant gnawing uncertainty of whether she belonged anywhere in the world, these were the threads that made her, fragile and ferocious in the same heartbeat. And yet, despite the ache and the terror, a strange, disorienting calm lingered around him. The Alpha walked behind her, silent but ever-present, his boots making no sound on the slick stones. He did not demand her to run faster. He did not chastise her. He did not attempt to control her. And in that, somehow, he offered her a strange form of safety she had not known existed in her life. She thought about the first time she had ever felt the silver flame awaken under stress. The moment had been violent, uncontrolled, a torrent of heat and light that had left her writhing on the ground, screaming in pain and fear. No one had comforted her then. No one had told her she could survive the fire inside her. Only the flames themselves had embraced her, and in that embrace, she had understood both the terror and the potential of what she carried. Now, the storm around them was nothing compared to the storm within her. Every nerve ended in a jolt of electricity, every heartbeat hammered with the kind of desperation that only comes when survival and instinct clash with desire and instinct, and yet she moved. Step by step, guided by the ruins, guided by her own pulse, guided by a presence she had no right to trust but somehow did. The ruined marketplace stretched behind them like a scar on the city, the cages empty now, abandoned, echoes of prisoners' cries faint but lingering. Rainwater had pooled in every crack and fissure, reflecting the flickering torches and fractured moonlight, creating a shifting mosaic that made her dizziness worse, that forced her to grip her ribs to keep upright. He noticed. Of course, he noticed. The Alpha always noticed. Every flinch, every tremor, every subtle twitch of muscle or line of tension in her shoulders drew his gaze. He did not comment, did not scold, did not intervene, at least, not in the way she expected. And that made the pull stronger. Made the vulnerability somehow feel less like weakness, less like a mark for the Empire to exploit, and more like a declaration of something untamed and human beneath the chaos. Her mind twisted again, memories flickering like broken shadows. Faces from her past appeared unbidden, her mother, long gone, whispering caution and fire in equal measure, the pack that had exiled her, eyes cold, mouth set in lines of judgment, the first wolf she had ever shifted into, the scent of fur, earth, and freedom mingling with the taste of iron and blood. She could remember the panic of the transformation, the uncontrollable growl of something primal erupting from her chest, and the relief when she survived it, the awe when she realized she had survived herself. And now, behind her, another wolf walked in human skin. Gold eyes. Scars. Power. The scent of storm and leather and raw energy. Every instinct she had screamed to flee, to hide, to fight alone, but every pulse of the silver flame, every tremor of recognition beneath her skin, told her something else: you do not have to face this alone. She wanted to scoff at the thought. Wanted to deny it. Wanted to remind herself that trust was a weapon and betrayal was a blade she had learned to wield against the world. And yet, when she dared to meet the edge of those gold eyes over her shoulder, she felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in years. Something like hope. Fragile, dangerous, terrifying hope. The ruins stretched onward, a labyrinth of fallen stone, toppled statues, and rain-soaked streets. Each step she took was a negotiation with pain, fear, memory, and desire. Her wound throbbed, the stake inside her ribs a constant, insistent reminder of how close she had come to death. Yet she pressed forward, driven by survival, by instinct, by the pull of the alpha who walked silently behind her, a shadow in the storm. He spoke only once, low and measured, his voice a gravelly whisper that seemed to vibrate through her chest. "You are not what they say." It was not praise. It was not comfort. It was acknowledgement. Recognition. Understanding. The kind of validation that could be a lifeline to someone like her, someone broken, someone exiled, someone who had spent years hiding her own fire in fear of it consuming her. She swallowed hard, the movement rough against the throb of her wound. She wanted to respond, to argue, to deflect. But words tangled in her throat. Breath came in sharp, wet bursts. Every muscle screamed in exhaustion and pain. Every thought threatened to collapse under the weight of memory, fear, and the strange, growing pull of this alpha who should have been another threat, another obstacle, another predator. Yet he was neither. Not entirely. He was a presence she could measure. A force she could sense. And somehow, even in the chaos of storm, pain, and memory, he offered something she had never had before, space to survive, and perhaps even the faintest possibility to breathe. The moonlight flickered over the ruins, and for a brief, fleeting moment, she could almost forget the stake, the pain, the exile, the empire hunting her. Almost. The ruins became a cathedral of memory and survival. Every toppled pillar a monument to endurance. Every pool of water reflected the battle scars in her soul. Every breath was a negotiation between past trauma and present danger. He walked behind her, silent, deliberate. And with every step, the storm inside her quieted slightly, just enough to recognize that survival, even in her fragile state, was not impossible. That maybe, just maybe, redemption was possible. That maybe the world could see her not as a weapon, not as a threat, not as a curse, but as something extraordinary, something powerful, something worth protecting. And in that moment, the audience, the invisible witness to her journey, could not help but root for her. Root for her survival. Root for her reclamation. Root for the spark of fire, danger, and brilliance that had been buried beneath exile, fear, and pain for far too long. Because she was not just running. She was awakening. And he, this alpha, this shadow, this stormwalker, was walking with her, silent, unwavering, and somehow, impossibly, human enough to offer her a lifeline she had never believed she deserved. The ruins of the marketplace faded behind them like a memory as they moved deeper into the outskirts of the city, where Rome's empire had left its fingers stretched thin and forgotten. Broken aqueducts traced the horizon, their arches bent and crumbling, vines crawling along the stone like green veins reclaiming the past. Every step she took across the wet earth and scattered debris sent tremors through her body, reminding her she was alive, painfully, impossibly alive. He led her silently, shadow and sentinel, his gold eyes cutting through the darkness with a patience that felt almost unnatural. The storm had subsided further, leaving a damp stillness, heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth and moss, a whisper of wind carrying secrets from centuries long buried. She did not speak. Could not. Her lungs burned from running. Her ribs throbbed with the ache of the stake still embedded just beneath her skin. Her heart pounded not only from pain, but from the magnetism of the alpha walking beside her, a constant presence that she could not deny, no matter how hard she tried. The forest thickened as they moved. The trees were older than anything she had known, their roots tangled like the thoughts that ran unbidden through her mind: exile, fire, betrayal, survival. Each branch scraped against the rain-washed stones, tapping her shoulder with shadows as if reminding her of the fragility of the world outside. The alpha made no sound. Each step measured. Each breath contained. Every now and then, she caught a glimpse of him watching her, not for mistakes, not for weakness, but like he was counting her scars and finding beauty in the very thing others had tried to erase. Then, at the crest of a hill veiled in mist, the temple appeared. Not a structure of Roman grandeur, not the familiar, cold, calculated lines of imperial stone. No, this temple predated the city, predated the empire itself. Its stones were worn smooth by centuries, the edges softened by wind and rain and time. The columns rose unevenly, some half-broken, others bowed under the weight of centuries, yet the place radiated a sense of enduring power, a pulse that thrummed beneath the skin like a heartbeat. The carvings caught her first. Wolves encircling a blazing sun, etched deep into the stone of the central archway, eyes fierce, teeth bared, tails curling around the fire that seemed almost alive. Each wolf was poised mid-leap, mid-hunt, as if they existed in perpetual motion, guardians of secrets she had never dared to imagine. The sun above them shone not with light, but with something else, promise, danger, destiny. She stepped closer. Her bare feet sank into moss and damp soil. The alpha watched her from a pace behind, silent, taut, like a predator measuring the land before striking, yet careful not to disturb her. She felt exposed under his gaze, yet inexplicably safe. Every nerve in her body tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. Her fingers brushed the cold stone. And the world reacted. Torches along the columns flared to life on their own, flames spiraling upward like fingers reaching for the sky. The air vibrated with an ancient energy, so subtle at first she thought it was a trick of her own exhaustion. Then the floor trembled beneath her feet, tiny shivers at first, growing into rolling waves that made the stones hum and resonate. Her breath hitched. Her chest rose and fell, her pulse thrumming with the rhythm of the earth. The bronze mural set into the floor at the temple's center began to glow beneath her palm, lines lighting up in response to the warmth of her touch. Wolves in bronze circled the sun, mouths open in silent howls, eyes alight with fire that mirrored the silver flame beneath her own skin. She recoiled, terrified and entranced all at once. This was impossible. No one had come here for centuries. No one had walked this sacred ground in a lifetime. She was barely surviving. Barely breathing. How could the prophecies of ages long past, the whispers of seers and oracles, have chosen her? The child of fire will kneel to no throne. Yet all thrones will kneel to her. The words spoke themselves inside her mind, not out loud, not in her own voice, but as if the temple itself had whispered them through her bones. Every echo rattled something deep in her chest, a tremor of disbelief, of wonder, of fear. She had never considered herself a hero. Never imagined herself more than a survivor, more than a fugitive, more than a mistake the world tolerated only because it could not destroy her fully. And yet, here she was, standing in a place that had existed long before Rome, and the ground beneath her recognized her as more than flesh and blood. More than exile and shame. Something extraordinary. Something chosen. The Alpha stepped forward, his boots silent against the glowing stones. He did not speak, did not announce his presence, and yet she felt the pull of him behind her, steady, grounding. She sensed him measuring her not with suspicion or doubt, but with something far more rare. Understanding. A comprehension of the storm inside her, the fire she tried to suppress, the pain she carried, and the potential that others had feared. He did not reach out. Not yet. He simply observed, a constant presence, and she realized the paradox of it. She felt safer with him here than she had ever felt with anyone else, yet danger simmered in every line of his frame. His power was a quiet thing, but undeniable. Magnetic. Predatory. A force that could kill, could protect, could claim. And she could feel it weaving around her own, threading itself into the pulse of her heartbeat. Her fingers traced the bronze mural again, feeling the heat rise beneath her skin in a way that was neither entirely her own nor entirely separate. The wolves circled the sun, and their eyes shimmered with light that called her forward, called her to something she had been avoiding all her life, purpose. Not survival. Not revenge. Not hiding. Purpose. Doubt clawed at her. She could barely keep herself alive. She had been running, hiding, bleeding, fleeing from an empire that would have seen her bones crushed without hesitation. She had been exiled, hunted, and despised. She had nearly died protecting a king who was no friend, a creature she barely understood, and yet the world expected her to be chosen? The Alpha's gaze found hers. Gold. Sharp. Knowing. Not commanding. Not demanding. but carrying weight, carrying certainty, carrying recognition. And in that look, she felt something she had never allowed herself, that perhaps the words were true. That perhaps she had been marked, called, chosen for something far larger than herself, larger than survival, larger than the exile and shame she carried like armor. The temple seemed to respond to their shared presence. The torches blazed brighter, the glow of the mural spread along the stones, veins of bronze lighting up in intricate designs she could not comprehend, symbols looping in ways that spoke to her very soul. Wolves crouched mid-leap, heads tilted toward the blazing sun, eyes fixed not on her but through her, seeing into what she might become. The heat under her palm spread to her chest, igniting the silver flame she had kept buried, feeding it, awakening it, making it surge and pulse with the temple's heartbeat. And the Alpha watched. Not with awe. Not with disbelief. But with something quieter. Reverent. Expectant. Like he had known, all along, the weight she carried, the fire she had been denying, the destiny she was too afraid to claim. The ground beneath them trembled again, a slow, rolling vibration that made the hair on her arms stand on end. Rainwater pooled and the cracks of stone shifted as if acknowledging her presence. The air hummed, carrying the scent of ozone, metal, and something older than Rome, older than the Empire, older than anything she had been told she could trust. She wanted to turn and run. Wanted to kneel and deny this calling. Wanted to reject the impossible weight that had been laid across her shoulders before she could even breathe. Her mind argued with her body, with her instincts, with the memory of pain, exile, and betrayal. How could she who barely survived, be the child of fire? How could anyone kneel to her, when she could barely stand? Yet every instinct in her body, every flicker of silver flame beneath her skin, every tremor in her muscles and bones told her differently. The Alpha's gaze, steady, unwavering, piercing through her doubt, carried the silent affirmation of something she could not yet articulate but instinctively knew: she was not just alive. She was chosen. She was necessary. She was power incarnate. And in the silence, amidst the mist, the ruins, the faint glow of torches and mural, and the heartbeat of a temple older than Rome itself, she understood something terrifying and exhilarating all at once: she was meant for more than survival. She was meant to stand. To rise. To command. To ignite not just her own fire, but the fire of all who would follow her, who would kneel, who would witness. And the Alpha, silent sentinel, predator, protector, something more, stood behind her, watching, knowing, and waiting. For the first time, she did not feel alone. Not entirely. Not while he remained. Not while the temple recognized her. Not while destiny itself had chosen her. The temple had not breathed so deeply in centuries, but in that instant, it inhaled like a living being and then roared as if awakening to the presence of its destiny. The doors, carved with the faces of ancient wolves and sons of bronze, splintered with a sound that echoed across the hills and into the forest beyond. She felt the vibration beneath her feet, a tremor that ran through her bones, and for the first time, the calm she had felt beside the Alpha shattered. They were here. The first figures stormed through the threshold, armor clanking, boots slamming against stone, torches flaring in their hands. Roman wolf hunters, their faces painted with the black ash of ritual and battle, eyes wide with fanatical certainty. Rival Alphas followed, their stances sharp, weapons drawn, jaws bared in defiance and fury. And at their center, a corrupted vampire priest, robes dark as storm clouds, his hands dripping with blood magic, eyes glinting with malice that could freeze the heart itself. They encircled her, the sound of their footsteps a drumbeat of accusation. She must be surrendered, one cried, the echo bouncing off the temple walls, striking her chest like a hammer. She'll bring ruin to all of Rome, another shouted, teeth flashing, claws curling against leather gauntlets. Choose your legion, a third barked, voice laced with desperation and command, demanding allegiance in a world that had never granted her choice. Her lungs constricted. Her chest throbbed with the memory of the stake, the pain of her ribs, the weight of the silver flame smoldering beneath her skin. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to vanish, to melt into the shadows that clung to the temple's broken corners. But the Alpha was there, a pillar of gold-eyed power, between her and the horde that sought to claim her, punish her, destroy her. The priest raised his hands, and the air thickened with a coppery tang. Blood magic hissed and twisted around his fingers, forming chains of dark energy that whipped toward her. The chains curled and hissed in the rain-slicked temple air, eager to bind, to corrupt, to consume. Her breath caught, and she flinched, instinctively recoiling, but before the chains could touch her, he moved. The Alpha moved. A shadow, a storm contained in flesh and muscle, and suddenly the chains struck him instead. They lashed against his chest and shoulders, sparks of dark energy crackling along the surface of his leather armor. He grunted, a low sound, and the glow in his eyes flared brighter, almost predatory. With a single, brutal motion, he shattered the blood magic chains, sending shards of energy ricocheting into the temple walls with a metallic hiss. She froze for a heartbeat, watching, awestruck and terrified. He could have torn through them all with one movement if he wanted. He could have silenced the wolves, the hunters, the priest. But he did not. Not yet. The temple became chaos incarnate. Wolves leapt from shadows, their forms flashing between human and beast, bones and fur rearranging in violent pulses, snarls tearing through the night. They collided with hunters, teeth snapping, claws rending, the ground shaking with each impact. She saw the Alpha shift too, his own form bending, muscles elongating, fur bristling, gold eyes glowing through the tempest of power and rage. And all the while, he shielded her. Time and again, a hunter lunged, a weapon swung, a spell aimed, and he threw himself between them. The wind of his movement knocked her off balance more than once, yet she found herself grounded by the sheer presence of him, by the certainty that he would not let them touch her. Not while he could breathe, not while he could fight. The priest screeched, a sound that curdled the blood in her veins. More chains formed, more shadows slithered toward her like vipers seeking flesh. She tried to shift, to summon the silver flame, but her power flickered weakly, hesitant, fearful. Her ribs screamed, her vision blurred with pain and adrenaline. Panic clawed at her chest. Move, the Alpha roared, and she obeyed, not understanding fully why. His voice was both command and reassurance, the paradox twisting inside her. He pushed her behind him, and for a heartbeat, she felt nothing but the press of his back, the warmth of his body, the hum of power that connected them, tethering her to survival even as the world tried to tear her apart. The rival Alphas charged next, the ground quaking beneath their weight, their roars and shouts melding with the growls of the wolves. She saw one leap, fangs bared, aimed straight for her, and the Alpha intercepted with a violent swipe, teeth gnashing, fur flaring in bursts of gold and silver. The hunter who had brought him to heel fell to the ground, screaming, a hand missing, armor shattered, and still he stood between her and the fury that sought to claim her. She wanted to speak, to thank him, to admit fear, to beg, to confess, but words were impossible. Only the pounding of her heart, the thrum of adrenaline, the flash of her own half-awakened power answered in tremors beneath her skin. The priest's eyes found her then, black voids lined with crimson, and he shouted words in a language older than Rome itself. The blood magic chains shot again, faster this time, encircling her like serpents, tightening, eager to bind. She cried out and tried to move, but he caught her, literally, in a sweep of gold-eyed power, plucking her back from the brink of ensnarement. "You will not touch her," he growled, low, unyielding. His voice carried through bone and stone, and she felt it resonate in her chest, deep and grounding. "Not while I breathe. Not while I stand." For the first time, doubt flickered in him. She saw it in the tension of his shoulders, in the tightening of his jaw. Even he hesitated as the tide of hunters and rival Alphas pressed in. They shouted, each voice a blade, each accusation a stone thrown at the fragile foundation of trust they had begun to build. She must be surrendered. She'll bring ruin to us all. Choose your legion. And she saw it, the moment when his hesitation broke something inside her. The fragile trust she had begun to place in him, the faint hope that perhaps he was not like the others, shattered in the glare of expectation and loyalty demanded by a world that did not care for her survival. Her chest tightened, the silver flame flickering weakly, hungry, impatient. Pain, fear, betrayal, and fury collided in her mind, a storm that left her reeling, legs trembling, ribs screaming, heart hammering. She realized then that she would never be anyone's pawn, never be the tool of their power struggles, never kneel at the feet of kings or hunters or priests who sought to claim her. She turned. Not running blindly, but with intent, with purpose, with the roaring surge of defiance that had been smoldering in her veins her entire life. She moved through the chaos, blood mixing with rain, sweat and dirt streaking her face, every nerve alive, every muscle screaming, every heartbeat a drumbeat of rebellion. The wolves snarled behind her, hunters lunged, spells hissed and struck, and yet she ran, each step carving her own path, claiming the night as her own, refusing to be tethered by fear, by prophecy, by expectation, by anyone. Behind her, she heard the alpha's roar, a sound that could shatter stone, a sound that carried fury, desperation, and the faintest trace of longing. But she did not look back. She could not. Not yet. Not while the storm of the world sought to control her, bind her, erase her. And as she disappeared into the night, the ruined temple collapsing into shadow behind her, she swore to herself, with every inch of fire and bone and blood in her body. She would not be their pawn. She would not kneel. She would not be broken. Not now. Not ever. The night swallowed her, rain soaking her hair, blood and dirt streaking her skin. Her ribs screamed, the silver flame beneath her skin pulsed weakly, angry, insistent, and she felt something new stirring, the raw, terrifying, exhilarating knowledge that she was alive, that she could survive, that she could fight, and that the world would have to reckon with her, on her terms, not theirs. The temple behind her was chaos incarnate, fire and blood and stone, the echoes of roars and magic lingering like smoke. But in the distance, through the mist, she could see him. The Alpha. Standing amidst the battle, every muscle taut, every nerve alive, eyes searching, golden, and waiting. And she ran, fueled not by fear, but by fury. By defiance. By the first sparks of a power she had been born to wield but had yet to claim. She would not kneel. She would not break. And the night would remember her. The night had swallowed the ruins of the temple behind her, and with it, the echoes of chaos, shouts, and battle. The rain had ceased, leaving only a damp, cold hush that clung to her skin and seeped into her bones. Her ribs throbbed relentlessly, each breath a jagged reminder of the stakes she had carried, of the nights she had survived, of the world that refused to grant her mercy. She had fled into the forest, through mud and shattered stone, guided by nothing but instinct, the silver flame flickering weakly within her like a candle against a storm. She found refuge beneath a collapsed aqueduct, the great stones leaning in uneven arches above her, casting shadows that moved with the wind. Water dripped from moss-covered cracks, forming little rivers that trickled along the ground, carrying the smell of earth and iron. She huddled there, knees drawn to her chest, trembling, teeth chattering from cold, pain, and fear, wondering how she had survived this far. She felt monstrous. Unworthy. Dangerous. Alive, but only barely. And then he was there. Not crashing through the shadows like a storm, not with chains or threats or authority. No. He was simply there, a presence that carried weight without demanding it, a warmth that seeped through the night and pressed against the icy cold around her. She had not heard him approach. She had not seen the movement of his boots against the wet stones. Yet when she lifted her gaze, the moonlight glinting off gold eyes, she felt the pull of him before she even realized she was holding her breath. He knelt beside her, careful not to startle her. One hand hovered, then gently touched her shoulder, guiding her away from the sharp edges of stone. She flinched but did not recoil completely. The hesitation in her body was mirrored in the careful, slow movements of his fingers as he wrapped a scrap of his cloak around her bleeding ribs, his touch deliberate, steady, almost sacred. The cloth was coarse, the scent of him, leather, rain, forest, mingled with the blood and sweat on her skin, and she realized, abruptly, that she could breathe a little easier simply because he was near. "You're alive," he murmured, low and rough, his voice carrying something more than observation. Concern. Relief. Something closer to awe. She wanted to laugh bitterly, wanted to tell him it was nothing, that she always survived. But the sound that came out was a hoarse, wet whisper, tinged with fear and shame. "I feel monstrous," she admitted, voice breaking. "Everything I touch burns. Every life I cross, everything I am, leaves destruction. I can't trust myself." He remained silent, his hand steady against her ribs, not withdrawing, not judging. And then, slowly, he spoke, voice quieter now, almost a confession. "I've lost control before," he said. His gold eyes softened as he met hers. "Once. I let the wolf inside me take over. Once, I killed someone I loved." Her heart stumbled, twisting painfully. She had thought herself the only one capable of such devastation, the only one condemned to live with the echoes of her own destruction. And yet, here he was, admitting it. Vulnerable. Human. Even in the midst of power she barely comprehended, he carried his own ghosts. His own guilt. His own fear. The distance between them shrank without conscious thought. Inches, at first. The warmth radiating from him seeped into her through the damp, cold night air. Steam rose from their breaths, curling in the moonlight, mingling in the silence between confession and understanding. Her pulse rattled her chest, sharp and fast, and she realized that the weight of fear she had carried, of exile, of battle, of betrayal, was somehow lighter here, under his gaze, with his hand against her. She wanted to deny it. She wanted to retreat into the shadows that had become her sanctuary for so long. But the fire in her veins, flickering, reluctant, eager, whispered differently. It whispered that he would not hurt her, that he would not betray her, that perhaps, for the first time in her life, someone could see all of her, the rage, the pain, the power, the fear, and not turn away. "Why are you here?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper, trembling. "You could have left me. You should have left me." He shook his head slowly, almost imperceptibly, leaning closer so that the warmth of him brushed against her shoulder, his breath a soft tide against her cheek. "I'm staying," he said, voice steady, unwavering. "Because I see you. All of you. Every scar, every secret, every spark. And I'm staying." She froze, a shiver running through her body that had nothing to do with the cold. Her hand brushed against his for a heartbeat, accidental, fleeting, but it set her nerves alight. She felt the weight of him, the predator, the alpha, the warrior, and somehow, instead of fear, instead of flight, she felt the pull of something else, trust. Fragile, hesitant, terrifying trust. The moonlight pooled across the broken stones, casting long shadows that flickered like specters of their pasts and futures. She leaned back slightly against the aqueduct wall, letting the heat from his body seep into her, letting herself exhale a breath she had been holding for months, years even. Every inhale and exhale became a negotiation with the storm inside her, fear and rage, loneliness and longing, guilt and hope. She began, but the words caught in her throat. There were too many things to say, too many admissions to voice, too many secrets weighing her down. Instead, she let her hand rest against the stone, letting the silence speak for her. He understood. She could feel it in the tilt of his head, the soft exhale of his breath, the way his eyes, gold and amber in the moonlight, never left her face. Time slowed. The night stretched out, heavy and intimate, the sound of distant water dripping from the aqueduct overhead, the rustle of leaves, the faint echoes of a world that still threatened her. And yet, here, in this small hollow, nothing could touch them. Not the hunters, not the empire, not the prophecy or the vampires or the ghosts of her own past. He moved closer, just enough that the warmth of his chest brushed against hers, just enough that she could feel the pulse of him, the rhythm of his heartbeat in tandem with her own. The scent of him, earth, leather, wolf, storm, wrapped around her, curling into her senses in a way that was disarming, frightening, and magnetic. She swallowed hard, gaze flicking to his lips before darting away, back to his eyes. There was danger there, raw and uncontained, but also something else. Something she had long denied herself, desire. Not for control, not for power, not for victory. But for connection. For recognition. For being seen without the need to hide, to fight, to flee. Her breath hitched as he leaned in slightly, and she felt the space between them shrink, felt the electricity of proximity, felt the almost impossible tension of longing and restraint, the brush of impending inevitability. The world itself seemed to hold its breath. The night waited with them, the stars flickering in silent witness. The water dripped, the moss smelled damp and alive, and her pulse drummed a rapid cadence in her chest as the air thickened with intimacy and unspoken confessions. And yet, she hesitated. Fear clawed at her mind. The silver flame beneath her skin flickered uncertainly, whispering warnings. This was dangerous. She had survived too long by being untouchable, by being alone. She could not trust. She could not allow attachment, not yet, not here, not now. He sensed it, as he always did, and his hand lifted, brushing a strand of damp hair from her face. His touch was gentle, reverent, careful. "You don't have to be alone," he murmured, voice low, almost a caress. "Not while I'm here. Not now. Not ever." Her chest tightened, tears threatening to spill, unbidden and unexpected. She wanted to push him away, to retreat into the shadows of herself that had kept her alive. And yet, the warmth, the presence, the understanding, it was a lifeline. A tether to a world she had long thought she could never enter. They sat like that for what felt like an eternity, inches apart, breaths mingling in the cold night air, hearts beating in separate rhythms that somehow harmonized. She traced the damp stone beneath her fingertips, grounding herself, letting him be, letting herself be. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the storm inside her began to settle. The silver flame flickered brighter, steadier, coaxed not by fear, not by desperation, but by connection. By trust. By the unspoken promise that he would not let her fall. And then, for a heartbeat, they both moved closer. Lips almost touching, breath mingling, the world narrowing to the space between them. The forest, the rain, the ruined aqueduct, the empire, the prophecy, all of it faded into silence. Just the two of them, suspended in possibility, suspended in the tremor of something fragile, terrifying, and undeniable. "I see you," he whispered again, gold eyes locked on hers. "All of you. And I'm staying." Her heart thundered. The silver flame beneath her ribs flared, and she realized, suddenly, that she did not have to hide it. Did not have to deny it. Did not have to run. She could exist, wholly and terrifyingly alive, and he would not falter. The night held them there, suspended between confession and temptation, between fear and desire, between survival and surrender. And for the first time in her life, she believed, truly believed, that perhaps she did not have to be alone. Perhaps she could trust. Perhaps she could let herself be seen. Perhaps she could let herself be loved. And in that delicate, dangerous, intimate moment, the bond between them deepened, a tether forged in fire, blood, pain, and understanding, stronger than the empire, stronger than exile, stronger than prophecy itself. The moonlight glinted off the broken stones of the aqueduct, the mist curling like smoke around them, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she exhaled fully, letting the weight of the world slip from her shoulders, even if only for a heartbeat. She was not alone. And he was not leaving. The rain had returned by dawn, a gray drizzle that soaked the marketplace like a cold, unfeeling hand. The torches had long since been extinguished, and the scent of smoke, iron, and wet stone mingled with the stench of fear, urine, and the crushed remains of a night that had seen chaos swallowed whole by the forest beyond. She stood, or rather was forced to stand, bound to a rough-hewn wooden post in the center of the marketplace. The ropes cut into her wrists, raw and burning, her skin blistered, bruised, streaked with blood that had dried to a tacky, unyielding sheen. The crowd pressed close, a sea of faces, wide-eyed and jeering, lips curling in cruel mockery. They were farmers and merchants, soldiers and opportunists, alphas and hunters, each one eager to witness the ruin of someone who dared survive. Their voices rose as one, chanting and shouting, their words like stones thrown against her chest. She is the downfall of this empire. She attacked the vampire king. The alpha protects her only to save himself. Every word was a dagger, each accusation twisting, lodging itself deep in her chest where the stake had nearly ended her life. She lifted her head, fighting back tears and bile, and tried to meet the eyes of the alpha, the only tether she had left to a world that hadn't yet fully abandoned her. He was there, standing a few feet away, armor gleaming faintly in the early gray light, hands clenched at his sides. His jaw was tight, his posture rigid, every muscle taut as if coiled to strike or flee, yet his gaze flickered toward her again and again, betraying an indecision that tore at her more than the ropes around her wrists ever could. The council arrived, a group of men and women draped in ceremonial garb, faces carved with authority, voices cold and final. They circled her slowly, inspecting, judging, condemning, as if she were nothing more than a defective piece of machinery in their vast, ordered empire. Her bloodline is cursed, one declared, pointing a finger that trembled only slightly in fear or anticipation. Half shifter, half oracle. She carries power beyond her control. She is not fit to live among us. Another scoffed, voice sharp as flint. And yet she survived the stake. She survived because she meant to strike the vampire king herself. This was no accident. This was rebellion cloaked in innocence. The words hit her harder than any chain, any blade, any attack she had endured. Her stomach twisted, bile rising as the murmurs of the crowd swelled into a tide of mockery and fear. People spat, laughed, and pointed, delighting in her torment. Each accusation gnawed at the fragile trust she had begun to place in the alpha, each word a reminder that the world had not changed, had not softened, had not granted her mercy. She searched for him then, needing him to speak, to declare, to defy, to save her. The alpha, the man who had wrapped her wound, who had whispered promises she almost believed in, who had seen all of her and chosen to stay, he could stop this. He could deny the counsel. He could shield her from the tide of scorn. But he did not. He looked at the council, at the eyes of Rome itself, and he hesitated. And in that moment, his silence struck her deeper than any whip, any stake, any accusation. His pause, the fraction of a heartbeat where he did nothing, was a blade cutting through her chest, a betrayal that seared hotter than fire. She could feel the shift in the air, the anticipation of the crowd, the council's satisfaction at his indecision. And she realized, with a clarity that was cruel and cold, that he would not choose her, not here, not now. Her chest ached, ribs screaming as the silver flame beneath her skin ignited, pulsing, surging, demanding release. It had been restrained for so long, caged beneath her fear and training, but now it could not be contained. She felt it coil inside her, a serpent of raw, luminous energy, trembling with rage and sorrow and power that had been denied, feared, and suppressed. And then it broke free. A flash of silver erupted from her core, blinding, searing, and the ground beneath her feet cracked with the force of it. Stone split like paper, splinters flying as if the earth itself could not contain her. The ropes holding her wrists splintered, burning away where the light touched, and she fell backward, arms lifting instinctively as the energy washed over the marketplace like a tidal wave. Screams erupted. Guards and merchants alike stumbled back, eyes wide with terror as the silver flame licked through the air, a roaring, living thing that reflected the fury and pain that had long been locked inside her. The marketplace, a place of humiliation and judgment, became chaos incarnate, fires igniting in scattered torches, crates splintering, water from overturned barrels steaming as it met the radiant heat of her power. The council froze, faces paling, robes fluttering in the unnatural wind that swirled around her. The corrupted priest hissed, stepping backward, chanting words that sounded hollow against the living force of her silver flame. His spells shattered before they could form, chains of blood magic disintegrating as if acknowledging that she was no longer bound by fear or obedience. And then she saw them, the guards, the hunters, the rival alphas, scrambling to escape the fury she had become. Their shouts were swallowed by the roar of the flame, by the power that surged through her veins and demanded recognition. She was not their pawn. She was not their tool. She was not a mistake. Her eyes, golden and flickering with silver light, swept over the crowd, and for the first time, she saw fear reflected in the eyes that had mocked her, feared her, condemned her. The power she had carried, hidden, restrained, feared, was no longer tentative. It was hers. Fully. Unapologetically. Terrifying. Beautiful. And then she looked at him. The Alpha. Still standing, still watching, still human enough to hesitate even as the world around him crumbled. She wanted to rage, to scream, to demand why he had not chosen her, why he had not stood beside her, why he had let them bind her in chains and mock her for the world to see. But as the silver flame licked around her, scorching stone and sending splinters into the air, she realized he had done something else. Something quiet, something subtle, something impossible to ignore. He had not abandoned her. Not completely. He had not intervened with chains or commands. He had not silenced the council with threats or steel. But his presence remained, a tether, a reminder that she was not entirely alone, that even in betrayal, he was still watching, still breathing, still connected to the fire that now consumed her from within. And yet, the betrayal still burned. His silence had been a choice. A refusal. A survival instinct that had cut her more deeply than any weapon. Her heart thudded violently, chest rising and falling, ribs aching, skin prickling with the lingering heat of the flame. The realization that even he could choose the empire over her, even he could hesitate at the moment she most needed trust, left her staggering on the precipice of despair and rage. The crowd scattered, panic replacing jeers, as the silver light became a storm in the center of the marketplace. Guards fell backward, crates ignited, torches tumbled, and the broken stones of the forum cracked under the energy she had unleashed. The Alpha's eyes followed her, wary and fierce, measuring, calculating, acknowledging the full force of the power he had glimpsed before, now untethered and unrestrained. Her heart raced, adrenaline, fury, and betrayal tangled in every nerve. She realized, painfully, that she had become the storm, the uncontrollable force, the very embodiment of everything they had feared. And she embraced it. The silver flame pulsed brighter, almost sentient, crackling in the gray dawn light, licking the edges of her hair, wrapping around her body like a living mantle of defiance. The marble beneath her cracked and split, the sound echoing through the now empty marketplace like thunder, as if the gods themselves bore witness to her fury and grief. Even in the chaos, even as the world recoiled, she felt something shift within herself. Not fear. Not despair. Not submission. Power. Recognition. Ownership of every shard of herself that had been denied, mocked, and hunted. The marketplace erupted into panic. Horses reared, merchants screamed, hunters fled, and the council, that symbol of order and judgment, could do nothing but stare, mouths agape, robes fluttering in the wind that had sprung from her own fire. And through it all, the Alpha stood, a shadow of tension and hesitation, the weight of the world pressing him, and yet, just enough. Just enough presence to remind her that she had not completely lost the only person who had ever seen her, truly seen her, without flinching. She did not look for permission. She did not wait for salvation. She did not hope. She acted. She became the force they had always feared. She became herself. The silver flame surged once more, brighter, hotter, unstoppable. Stone split. Water hissed. Torches flared, then shattered. The ground trembled beneath her, and the empire, for a heartbeat, seemed to shrink away from the magnitude of her existence. And in that instant, she knew something vital. She was not a pawn. She was not a tool. She was not bound by fear, expectation, or betrayal. She was fire. She was fury. And she had only just begun. The marketplace lay in ruin. Smoke curled from splintered crates, torches lay shattered, and the marble floor itself seemed cracked and trembling, jagged lines snaking outward like lightning frozen in stone. The chaos had swallowed the city square whole. The citizens, once eager spectators of cruelty, had fled or crouched in terror behind overturned stalls, wide-eyed, mouths gaping as if the world itself had fractured before their eyes. And in the center of it all, she stood. Burned, bloodied, soaked from rain and sweat, yet unbroken. Her breaths came ragged, chest heaving, ribs still screaming from the blow of the stake she had taken for the vampire king, yet the fire in her veins had grown from a flicker to a roaring blaze. Every scar on her body, every bruise, every bleeding cut was no longer a mark of weakness but a testament to survival, defiance, and raw, uncontainable power. The silver flame she had barely controlled before now surged freely, wrapping her in its luminous, violent embrace. It danced along her skin, licking at her hair, swirling around her limbs in ribbons of living light, the air vibrating with its intensity, so hot and charged that the wet stone beneath her hissed and cracked. She could feel her ancestors stirring through her bones, their whispers ancient, fractured syllables carried in the marrow, in the sinew, in the tendons that burned and tensed with the pulse of the magic she had always been taught to fear. You are the fire. You are the wolf. You are the blood. You are the reckoning. The Alpha stood behind her, distance measured, tension taut in his every muscle. He had fought beside her, had shielded her from hunters and priests alike, had bled, had risked, yet now, in this moment of unrestrained power, even he paused, admiration flickering across his face beneath the shadow of war and fear. He understood, instinctively, that she was no longer merely a survivor, no longer merely a pawn, no longer merely the girl who had cowered beneath aqueducts and the ruins of temples. She was a force of nature. From the chaos, the vampire king staggered forward, weakened, pale from the wounds she had taken for him. His gaze swept over her, flickering with awe and something like disbelief, blood staining his lips, hands trembling as he tried to rise. The corrupted priest, his robes dark as sin, moved with lethal intent, raising hands that shimmered with blood magic, chanting words that promised death and dominion. His eyes gleamed with ambition, malice, and a certainty that she, fragile and mortal seeming, had no right to challenge the natural order of power. You were meant to die, the priest spat, voice sharp, cutting through the chaotic roar of the marketplace. Not to rise. Not to claim what was never yours. You were never meant to stand. The words, meant to wound, merely fanned the flames inside her. They ignited a resolve as fierce as any silver fire, a rage that had been tempered in the crucible of exile, betrayal, battle, and loss. Every insult, every accusation, every second she had been hunted, mocked, or denied had built toward this moment. Her hands lifted, palms glowing, energy coiling around her like a living storm, a wind of fire and light, hot and pure and terrifying. I am not your sacrifice, she answered, voice steady, ringing like a bell across the ruined marketplace. Her words carried power because she spoke them as truth, as defiance, as self-possession. The silver flame flared, wrapping around her like a crown, a mantle, a declaration to the universe, I exist. I am not your tool. I am not your pawn. I am not your victim. The priest faltered, a flicker of doubt in his eyes as he felt the weight of her power, the tangible, living force of her spirit, bending the very air around them. The stones beneath the marketplace shuddered and lifted as if acknowledging her dominion, small rocks skimming over the cracked ground, caught in the invisible currents of magic she had summoned. She could feel the energy radiating outward, a heartbeat of power that mirrored her own, extending through the ruins, through the fleeing citizens, through the torn banners and broken wood, through the empire itself. Her wolf form began to manifest, partial but unmistakable. Shadows stretched unnaturally from her, curling and shifting, hinting at a body larger, fiercer, more primal than human. Her eyes glowed gold and silver, shifting, reflecting the lightning of power, the hunger and the glory, the intelligence and instinct of a predator beyond control. She did not resist it. She embraced it. It was part of her, the half-shifter, the oracle, the fire-born child of prophecy. The whispers of her ancestors grew louder, carried on the wind, urging, chanting, guiding, reminding her of strength long denied. Rise. Stand. Take. Protect. Burn. You are the reckoning. The corrupted priest moved, desperate, hands weaving intricate patterns of blood magic meant to ensnare, maim, kill. But her fire struck first, a wave of light and heat, and it collided with his spells, scattering them like leaves caught in a storm. He staggered back, his voice rising to a scream, anger cracking into panic. His minions fled, the soldiers and hunters scrambling, unable to comprehend the sheer magnitude of what they were facing. The Alpha's eyes were locked on her, gold and amber reflecting the brilliance of her silver flames. Awe and fear mingled in a way that made her chest tighten. She felt him behind her, not commanding, not intervening, but a steadying presence, tethering her to the world even as she became a force beyond it. She could feel his heartbeat, steady, near, alive, and it grounded her just enough to maintain control amidst the eruption of her fury. The vampire king stumbled closer, pale and weak, a hint of vulnerability that few had ever witnessed. She had saved him once. Now, in his weakness, she did not hesitate to shield him with the coils of power that wrapped her like armor. She roared, her voice no longer human, resonant with the wild, primal cadence of the wolf within, and the priest reeled, the sheer sound shredding the air, a weapon of will and spirit that no magic could withstand. Stand down, the priest shrieked, voice cracking with disbelief. You are nothing. A child. A monster. This is not yours to command. She stepped forward, every movement deliberate, every footfall a declaration. The silver flames roared higher, spiraling around her, and the air shimmered with heat and light. The stones of the marketplace lifted, swirling around her, a cyclone of earth, marble, and rubble, orbiting her as if acknowledging her authority. She was no longer merely a survivor, no longer merely a girl who had taken a stake for a king. She was the fulcrum of destiny, the epicenter of power, the embodiment of every fear, hope, and fury that had ever been denied. The priest faltered, eyes widening as he realized his power was futile, inadequate, eclipsed by something he could neither comprehend nor control. He raised his hands one last time, desperate, but she met his gaze, gold eyes flashing, silver fire coiling through her, and she spoke again, her voice carrying through the chaos. I am not your sacrifice. The words reverberated like thunder, striking the stones, the air, the fleeing citizens, the fractured empire itself. The priest screamed, a sound of fury, frustration, and horror, as the marketplace shook with the energy she now wielded fully. The silver flames twisted higher, encircling her like a halo of defiance and inevitability. Shadows stretched from her form, long and lupin, and the Alpha's breath caught at the sight, awe etched into his tense features. She could feel the power coursing through her, surging from every scar, every bruise, every act of survival, every moment she had been hunted, shamed, and feared. It was hers. All hers. No longer a flicker, no longer tentative. She could not be denied. She could not be broken. She could not be silenced. The priest shrank back, realization dawning too late, she was beyond his control, beyond fear, beyond prophecy meant to bind her. She had claimed her own destiny. The marketplace trembled beneath the weight of her declaration. Marble splintered, wood splintered, banners shredded, and the wind carried whispers of awe, terror, and wonder alike. The Alpha moved closer now, just beyond the whirlwind of power, cautious, protective, unwavering. Their eyes met, and in that instant, the storm of magic, fury, and destiny became a shared heartbeat. He had seen her, truly seen her, at the edge of destruction, and he did not flinch. He had chosen, silently, without words, to acknowledge the force she had become. The priest, realizing defeat, hissed one final prophecy, teeth bared, trembling, you were never meant to rise. You were never meant to stand. You were only the shadow of what was intended. She laughed, a sound of fury and triumph, low and dangerous, echoing through the ruined marketplace, carrying with it centuries of exile, fear, and denial. The flames of her silver fire twisted higher, coiling around her in living tendrils, reflecting in her lupin eyes, casting light across the ruins like a cleansing fire. "You were wrong," she said, voice steady, unyielding. "I am not your shadow. I am not your sacrifice. I am the reckoning." The priest shrieked again, retreating, faltering against the undeniable truth of her power. Every eye in the marketplace, those who had mocked, those who had feared, those who had fled, now looked upon her with awe, terror, and something unspoken, something primal, recognition. The Alpha stepped forward, just far enough to remain safe yet close enough to offer unspoken support. She felt the tether of him, grounding her even as she soared, a wolf-child of fire and prophecy, fully realized, fully claimed. Her power had become her voice, her shield, her declaration. She had risen from the chains, the stake, the betrayal, and the Empire's hatred. And as the silver flames swirled, lifting stones, scorching air, and bending reality around her, she faced the true villain, the corrupted priest, trembling, powerless, his ambition shattered against the force of her being. Her gaze locked onto his, gold eyes flaring with wrath and certainty. The world trembled, holding its breath, watching the standoff between a woman who had claimed her destiny and a man who had sought to deny it. The marketplace was silent for a heartbeat, suspended in the charged aftermath of power unleashed, of prophecy fulfilled, of rage and triumph made flesh. And in that silence, she knew, with every nerve, every heartbeat, every shiver of energy through her body, that the story was far from over. The Empire might crumble. The Vampire King might heal. The priest might scheme again. But she was fire. She was wolf. She was no one's pawn. She was everything. And the world would remember. The marketplace, though shattered, seemed to hold its breath. Smoke spiraled lazily into the gray dawn sky, drifting over broken marble, splintered wood, and overturned carts. The rain had stopped, leaving the stones slick, glistening, reflective, as if the world itself mirrored her defiance. Every droplet clung to the silver flames that still wrapped around her, giving her the appearance of a creature born of both fire and moonlight, untouchable, almost divine. She stood there, chest heaving, eyes flashing with gold and silver, her wolf form partially manifested in the shadows that stretched unnaturally long across the ruins. Her breath came in ragged gasps, but each exhale was deliberate, commanding, a symphony of control over the chaos she had become. The air vibrated with the residual energy of her power, stones trembled, the earth beneath her cracked further, and the broken remnants of the Empire seemed to whisper in awe and fear. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel it fully, the weight of survival, the sheer magnitude of defiance, the thrill of being alive when so many had wished her dead. And then, instinctively, she glanced toward the Alpha. He was standing at the edge of the marketplace, his figure tense, rigid, shadowed, yet unyielding. There was no verbal reassurance, no touching of hands, no speech needed. His gaze alone anchored her, tethered her to the fragile humanity that still lingered beneath the wolf and flame. She had expected judgment, doubt, perhaps even disdain. Instead, she found a silent acknowledgement, a recognition of the storm she had become and the woman she was willing to claim herself as. But even in the glow of triumph, doubt crept in, twisting with the silver flame. The betrayal, the council's accusations, the Empire's disdain, they had not disappeared. They still lingered, unspoken, like shadows under the sun, threats waiting for the moment to strike again. And yet, she refused to falter. She would not kneel. She would not bend. Not now. Not ever. Her mind flashed with questions, haunting, insistent. They were not meant for anyone but her, but she whispered them aloud, letting them roll through the cold air, challenging the universe, challenging the world, challenging the viewer, the silent witness to her ordeal. Would you have chosen her, or feared her? Would you have knelt to her power, or turned away in terror? Is she a hero, or a catastrophe? Her words lingered, echoing off cracked stone and empty stalls, carried by the faint wind that twisted through the ruins. The marketplace was silent now, but it spoke in tension, in debris, in the smoldering remnants of torches and splintered wood. It was a testament to her defiance, a mirror to her spirit, and a warning to those who would dare deny her again. The Alpha shifted slightly, a subtle movement, yet it carried weight. His gaze never left hers, and in that moment, it was enough. Enough to remind her that even amidst betrayal, even amidst chaos, even amidst doubt, she was not alone. She had allies. Few, yes, but real. Strong. Fierce. Committed to her existence and to the world she was creating with every step she dared to take forward. The silver flames around her dimmed slightly, not extinguished, but restrained, flowing like liquid light over her skin, illuminating her form as if the world itself had decided she would not be hidden in shadow. And as the storm of power quieted to a simmer, she took a slow, deliberate step forward, chest still rising and falling with controlled intensity, her wolf form shifting subtly in response to the pulse of her magic. She could feel the echoes of those who had mocked, those who had condemned, those who had sought to bind her and break her. They were distant now, irrelevant, unable to touch the fire that roared within her. Her voice carried again, softer, intimate, almost hypnotic, weaving through the empty marketplace, across shattered marble and trembling stone. If this story lit something inside you, subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections. Here, we tell tales that burn. The words lingered like a caress and a challenge, not just to those who had witnessed her triumph but to anyone who had ever doubted the strength of a woman, the power of survival, the necessity of defiance. The invitation was simple yet potent: join her, witness her, believe in her. And then she moved, forward, away from the ruins, leaving behind the echo of fire, defiance, and silver light. The ground beneath her feet trembled subtly, a slow, rolling vibration that traveled like a heartbeat through the ruins. She did not falter. The earth itself seemed to acknowledge her passage, responding not with fear, but with reverence. The marketplace lay in quiet devastation, a silent testament to the power she now claimed, yet the world beyond held whispers of danger and promise alike. From the shadows at the edge of the ruined square, a figure stirred, cloaked and unseen, a presence that seemed to breathe in tandem with the quaking earth. A voice, low and rasping, carried through the morning mist. She is not the only one. The words were a warning, a promise, a prophecy threaded with uncertainty and dread. The cadence of the speech, slow and deliberate, made the hairs on her arms rise even as she moved forward, unaware of the observer. Another voice, colder, older, carrying the weight of centuries, joined the first, reverberating across the trembling stones. The true Alpha hasn't risen, yet. The murmurs faded into the gray light, leaving only the echo of possibility, of destiny still unfolding, of battles yet to come. The tremor beneath her feet pulsed once more, subtle but insistent, a reminder that even as she walked from the ruins of the Empire's marketplace, the story was far from finished. Forces unseen, powers unclaimed, destinies unfulfilled still lingered in the shadows, waiting, watching, measuring. She did not stop. She moved with purpose, each step deliberate, grounded, a testament to the strength that had been honed through suffering, betrayal, and fire. Her wolf form shifted fully now in glimpses, shadows flickering across her body, luminous eyes reflecting both light and darkness. The silver flame clung to her, not consuming, not restraining, but flowing in harmony with the power she had embraced. She was both human and something greater, a bridge between worlds, a force beyond reckoning. As she disappeared into the mist, the ruined marketplace stood silent, a monument to defiance and survival. The Alpha followed at a measured distance, steady, unwavering, the unspoken bond between them now forged in fire, silver, and shared survival. The fallen priest, the shattered council, and the fleeing citizens were left behind, powerless witnesses to the birth of something far larger than themselves, a reckoning, a prophecy, a flame that would not be quenched. The shadowed figures in the distance remained, whispering, plotting, weighing the girl who had taken a stake meant for a king, who had survived, who had claimed her power, and who had refused to bend to expectation. And then silence fell. The camera of the mind lingers on the trembling earth, the faint glow of silver on distant mist, the low rumble that hints of forces yet unseen. The words of the whispers hang in the air, impossible to ignore, chilling in their promise. She is not the only one. The true Alpha hasn't risen, yet. A heartbeat passes. 2. The air is thick, heavy with portent. And then, darkness. The story, though it had reached a climax of fire and power, was not finished. It simply paused, leaving a question burning in every mind that had witnessed it. A question that would haunt, challenge, and ignite every imagination. Who else waits in the shadows? What forces will rise to challenge her? What destiny has been written for the Alpha yet to awaken? And who, in the end, will stand, or fall, before the reckoning of fire, wolf, and prophecy? The marketplace fades completely into black. The silver flame, the shadows of the wolf, the tremor of the earth, they linger in memory, a promise of stories yet untold, battles yet to rage, destinies yet to unfold. And as the screen of imagination darkens, the final invitation echoes softly, a whisper that thrills and tempts. Subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections. Witness her rise, her fury, her fire. Be part of a world where tales burn and legends live. The silence stretches. The darkness remains. And the story waits.